All right, hello, History 363. So today I'm going to be talking about Pompey the Great in the 60s. Pompey is consul in 70 BC, having come in kind of late, swooped in late to aid Crassus in the final mopping up of the Spartacus rebels. So they both run for the consulship in 71 and then serve in 70. And as I noted last lecture, it's actually a really productive consulship. It sees laws passed that overturn sort of the excesses of the Sullan constitution. The powers of the tribunes of the plebs are restored. Finally, a settlement, a working compromise for the jury panels is effected. And the consuls help the censors produce a really good census. Now, one little other piece of the Sullan reforms, a piece that sticks, is that Sulla decided that the consuls, rather than going off to a province during their consular year, should stay in Rome and only be provincial governors afterwards. And this is actually a big shift. For the Republic prior to Sulla, the consuls are almost never in Rome. They're in Rome at most for a month or so before they go off to their province to fight, they hope, their big, glorious war. Now, Sulla sees this as the possibility for mischief, namely that in the absence of the consuls, you can have, mischievous tribunes like, Gaius Gracchus or Appuleius Saturninus causing havoc. And so Sulla says, no, the consuls will stay in Rome. If anyone needs to propose legislation, at least during that period when Sulla bans the tribunes from bringing forth legislation, it'll be the consuls passing consular laws. At any rate, this part sticks. So Pompey and Crassus don't go off to provinces. And notably, Pompey doesn't immediately go off to a province in the year after his consulship. He seems to be kind of waiting for something good to come up. And in 67, sort of the big command that Pompey wants arises, or a problem worthy of Pompey arises, and that is the problem of piracy. Piracy at this point is endemic across the Mediterranean, with a lot of the pirates themselves, and by pirates I don't know if we should necessarily think sort of Skull and Crossbones or Jack Sparrow. In many instances, these are people who live in communities and have just learned that they can make a living off piracy. In some instances, they're people who may have previously been mercenaries for the Hellenistic kings, but now that warfare has really been tamped down, they are just turning to sort of their own entrepreneurial piracy. And the Romans have actually really fed into this problem in that in the earlier 2nd century, a key state that really policed the eastern Mediterranean was Rhodes, which has it's a city with its own citizen navy, and the Rhodians worked pretty hard to tamp down on piracy because the Rhodians had relied on commercial trade to fund themselves. Now, if you remember, in 167, the Romans punished the Rhodians by making Delos a free port, which really hamstrings the city of Rhodes. They lose a huge amount of trade that otherwise would have come through Rhodes and then to Italy, and therefore they can no longer afford to keep their very efficient citizen navy on the seas. And so Rome essentially hamstrings the people who were doing watching out for pirates and tamping down on piracy. But Rome has really never showed an interest in that kind of activity. Even though Rome is the unquestioned hegemon of the Mediterranean, it hasn't, maintained fleets to watch out for piracy. It has on a few occasions engaged in sporadic anti-piratical campaigns in the 1st century BC, but never in a particularly thorough way. So what Pompey gets in 67 BC, he probably has been arranging it for a little while, is a law, a special tribunician law, the Lex Gabinia, passed by the tribune of the plebs Gabinius. And the Lex Gabinia essentially gives Pompey a huge command, tens of thousands of soldiers, hundreds of ships, and the money to finance this all. And what's notable, this is actually really important when we look forward towards the empire. What's notable is his command is going to, his provincia is going to be in every single province that touches the Mediterranean and 50 miles inland. And Pompey is going to have proconsular imperium, but it's going to be a proconsular imperium that is greater, maius, than any magistrate that he might encounter who are governing their individual provinces. So in effect, Pompey has been given a Mediterranean-wide command that allows him to move from province to province. That kind of makes sense, right? If you're pursuing pirates and they just sort of sail over there, you sort of want some kind of administrative arrangement that allows Pompey to move from area of operations to area of operations, since these pirates, by definition, are highly mobile. They can get their ships and they can sail somewhere else. But at the same time, this really points towards the future, how the Roman emperors will govern the Roman Empire by being given, at this point it's almost a legal fiction, a huge multi-provincial command that ultimately includes all of the provinces that have major Roman military forces. Now, Pompey's command is set to last 3 years, but Pompey manages to finish off the pirates in 1. His force is sufficient, and he's also very energetic, therefore he chases the pirates out of their various lairs, particularly campaigns particularly hard in Cilicia. And actually, of the pirate captives that he takes, and again, in some instances, there are kind of whole communities that the business is piracy. Some of you may remember the Somali piracy. That was a problem, seems now over a decade ago. But in some instances, there were whole communities where this was actually a big part of their economy, was engaging in both fishing and piracy. It seems that this is probably the same situation. And Pompey actually takes a number of these captives and settles them in Italy. There clearly are places in Italy that aren't that have become underpopulated, and now they are farmers in Italy. So Pompey's campaign is efficient. It only lasts a year. By all accounts, it's very successful. But now Pompey needs another command, and he, pretty pleased with himself, looks to the east. To the war with Mithridates VII, which has flared up again, probably in 74 BC. Essentially, Rome's ally, the king of Bithynia, has died. Mithridates decides to take advantage of the fact that the Romans are distracted with Sertorius in Spain, and of course by 73 they're also distracted with Spartacus in Italy. And so Mithridates thinks, well, this is a good point to pick a fight. He invades Bithynia, and the Romans respond. And here, Mithridates is not in as a strong military position as he is in 88, when he's able to really overrun Asia. The Romans pretty quickly push him back. So far, the Roman commander, Licinius Lucullus, has been pretty successful. He's managed to not only drive Mithridates back, but to actually drive him out of Pontus. Mithridates VI then goes and takes refuge with the king of Armenia, and Lucullus has been successful also in moving into Armenia and even capturing the capital of Tigranocerta. So up until now, Lucullus has had some successes, although there were some setbacks, including some army mutinies. But Pompey looks over and says, you know what? This would be, I would really like now to finish Mithridates off. And you could even say this is Pompey being a bit of an opportunist, in that Pompey actually throughout his career has kind of looked to take commands where it's kind of clear that the tide has turned and Pompey can kind of swoop in and win the victory. So he gets the command against Sertorius when it's already clear that Metellus Pius is starting to gain the upper hand. He gets the command, he comes over and helps with the Spartacus War after Crassus has already decisively defeated Spartacus. And now that Lucullus has done a lot of the hard work, Pompey says, I would love to step in and mop up. And so to get this command, he needs another tribunician law. This is the Lex Manilia. And the Lex Manilia gives Pompey another multi-provincial command, so that he is able to move across the various provinces in the east that he might need to if he is maneuvering against Mithridates, who at this point is moving in between Pontus and Armenia with his forces. So again, the idea of these big multi-provincial commands looks forward to the empire. But once Pompey gets the command, he is largely effective. He manages to corner Mithridates, who ultimately is overthrown by his own children. His children say, gosh, either Dad loses everything, or we get rid of Dad and maybe keep some bits of the kingdom. And that's pretty much what, so they, as Mithridates realizes he's facing a coup of his own kids, in desperation, he tries to kill himself. Unfortunately, he's made himself immune to poison because he every day drinks a little bit of poison to strengthen himself. And so he ultimately has a slave help him slit his own throat. So that's the end of Mithridates VI, the Poison King. Pompey now, in 64, stays and does a complete reorganization of the Roman East. Amongst other things, there are some major annexations, including Pontus and Bithynia, and also Pompey annexes what is left of the old Seleucid Empire. At this point, the Seleucid Empire has been shrinking down. It really just controls a kind of set of small shifting territory in Syria, and Pompey puts an end to this and makes Syria as well a Roman province. He also goes down into Judea, and famously actually enters into the Holy of Holies in the temple, where supposedly he sees essentially the seat and the curtain. Again, the only people supposed to enter the Holy of Holies is the high priest and Yahweh. And so Pompey, having done this huge settlement and reorganization, which really creates a whole new set of Roman provinces in the Eastern Mediterranean, is therefore ready to return by 62 BC, having, again, completely transformed what the Roman Near East looks like. Now, meanwhile, in Rome, there has been a very serious sedition. And this sedition comes from a nobleman named Catiline, Lucius Sergius Catilina. And Catiline has wanted to run for the consulship for 63, and has unfortunately found himself defeated. And the person who defeats him is a maybe familiar name, Marcus Tullius Cicero. And let's just actually take a step back. As we enter into the late Republic, from the 70s on down into the 40s, Cicero is going to become this incredibly rich and important source. Indeed, we are better informed about the late Roman Republic, the nitty-gritty details of politics, in part because we have Cicero's letters and his speeches, which are preserved and cataloged after his death in the Roman Civil War. And so this means this is actually one of our, we were better informed really about how Roman politics works during this period than at any other moment during the millennium of Roman history, from the regal period down to the late Empire. So Cicero is this incredibly rich primary source. Of course, sometimes he can be difficult, because Cicero, in his speeches and letters, doesn't always give us the background information that we would maybe like. So we still also rely on, say, the lives of Plutarch to kind of provide us with a narrative history, or the Appian Civil War to give us some narrative. But Cicero nonetheless gives us a rich primary source that leaves us really, really well informed about what's going on during this period. So he's not just an important political player, he's also an incredibly important source. And Cicero's had an interesting career, and also in some ways his election to the consulship is only made possible by the fact that Sulla has done away with the requirement that consuls just go off to their provinces and fight, because Cicero is not someone who's particularly distinguished militarily. He may have had a bit of military service here and there during his youth, but his claim to fame and his claim to prominence is the fact that he is a really good public speaker. A good public speaker, and also someone who excels in the law courts, where he specializes mostly as a defense attorney. Although sometimes he does prosecute, most famously prosecuting the despicable Roman governor Verres for misconduct in Sicily. And Cicero's prosecution of Verres is successful to the extent that Verres goes into exile before he can be convicted, although he takes a lot of his ill-gotten loot with him. So that's in 70 BC, and Cicero's prominence has allowed him to rise up the cursus honorum, and this is important because Cicero is a new man, a novus homo. He is from the little town of Arpinum, the Volscian hill town that has only had full citizenship since 188 BC. And of course, someone else famous, another famous new man comes from Arpinum, and that's Gaius Marius. And indeed, Cicero sort of finds inspiration in Marius's ascent up the cursus honorum, just as he has moved up the cursus honorum. So Cicero is finally elected consul for 63 BC, and detects that Catiline is plotting what essentially seems to be a straight-up coup, a plan to kill the consuls, set fires across Rome, and essentially install Catiline, presumably as consul. This is a patrician who sees the consulship as his birthright, and is frustrated that he can't get election and can't win the election. And of course, the fact that Sulla has kind of shown that it is possible to violently install yourself in Rome, may lead him to think that this is actually a plausible path. Cicero gives a series of speeches, the Catiline orations, in which he basically makes the case that something sinister is afoot. These speeches, the first of these speeches, are given when Catiline's actually still in Rome. Catiline, however, eventually flees. He goes north to join up with an army that is raised, a small army, less than a legion, but raised from a mix of disgruntled Sullan veterans, supplemented by some Gallic tribes, some Gallic kind of mercenaries. Cicero arrests a number of conspirators and then, notably, executes them without trial. And here it is Cicero who is on the wrong side of the law, right? Remember that a key aspect of Roman citizenship is the right of provocatio, the right of appeal. And Cicero denies these conspirators that right, something that will get him into trouble later. For now, he claims that he acts decisively to save the Republic. His colleague, Marcus Antonius, who seems to have been, not the Marcus Antonius, but Marcus Antonius, who seems to have been a bit mixed up in this conspiracy as well, or at least at some point may have been kind of adjacent to this conspiracy. Nonetheless, leads an army which defeats Catiline in battle, and Catiline himself falls fighting. And for this Catilinean conspiracy, we again are very well informed. We not only have Cicero's speeches, but we also have another monograph by Sallust. Sallust, who has written our monograph on the Jugurthine War, also provides a monograph on the war with Catiline. And so therefore we have a kind of narrative history that allows us to sort of read the somewhat Cicero's speeches, which are a primary source, but again, Cicero may assume that his audience knows things that we don't. Cicero, therefore, claims that he's saved the Republic, and this happens right before Pompey's army returns. And indeed, I think there's a bit of anxiety about what will happen when Pompey gets back. Will Pompey, demand another consulship? Will he use his army as leverage against the state? And indeed, it's quite likely that Catiline, one of the reasons that Catiline is trying to strike now in 63 is that he knows that he doesn't stand a chance of any kind of coup once Pompey and his army actually returns. But anyway, by the time Pompey and his army return in 62, Catiline is dead. Here, Pompey pleasantly surprises everybody. He says, I just want to be one more citizen in the Republic, albeit a distinguished one. He demobilizes his army at Brundisium, paying all of his soldiers a lavish donative. And then he returns to Rome, lays down his command, and simply hopes to be a distinguished senator. And Pompey actually is pretty quickly frustrated, because one of the things that he sort of expects that everyone will do for him is to provide land for his veterans. And once he's laid down his army, once he's given up his command, once he just is another senator, he discovers that people aren't as willing to bend over backwards to do that. And so therefore, Pompey begins to look for allies who can help him get what he wants. And he actually discovers that there's a couple of other people who need things and could use a political alliance. So what we'll talk about next time is the formation of the first triumvirate, the alliance between Pompey the Great, Marcus Licinius Crassus, and a young up-and-coming noble, Julius Caesar. We'll talk soon.